After a natural disaster, such as an earthquake, hurricane, volcano, or tsunami, the disaster area and the people who live in that area require aid. And there are a number of different types of aid, and this is what we're going to look at today. Number one is bilateral aid. So this is when one country gives aid to another country. Number two is multilateral aid. This is from an international organisation which receives money from several different countries. For example, the United Nations would be someone who would give multilateral aid. Number three is conditional or tied aid. This is when one country donates money or resources to another, but with conditions attached, which will often be in the developed country's favour. And lastly, we have charitable/voluntary aid. And this is aid which is funded by donations from the public through organisations such as Oxfam. The four types of aid we've just looked at can be given in two forms: short-term aid or long-term aid. Short-term aid is also known as emergency aid to help people survive after the natural disaster. It provides people with things which they will desperately need. This type of aid is received immediately after the disaster, in the days and weeks after the event, to help people survive in their area which has been destroyed. So, examples of short-term aids could be tents, because if people have lost their home, they will need somewhere to sleep. Blankets, power lines and heating lines could come down, so people might need blankets for warmth. Food packages, shops could be destroyed in these disasters along with roads, so it's difficult to get food into the area. Doctors to help those who have been injured. Rescue workers to help those who are trapped under rubble. And helicopters again to help with rescue and lifting buildings up to see if people are underneath. Aid can also be given long term. So long-term aid is also known as development aid. This aid provides people with things that they will need to start rebuilding their lives again. This aid is given a few weeks or months after the disaster, and very often the countries have to repay the money that they receive. Examples of long-term aids are things like houses. So countries could donate the materials to build houses, and this then allows communities to rebuild. Seeds. So instead of giving food, you give seeds, because these are going to grow year after year and then provide a more sustainable path back to where the country was before the disaster hit. Vaccines. After a disaster, if you don't have the correct health in place, and the conditions that you're now forced to live in could bring diseases, so providing vaccines against these help people to stay healthy for longer. And building new water systems so that communities are able to regrow with fresh water, which may have been destroyed in the disaster.